Let's talk about CellarTracker for a moment, even though I have a cold. An excellent website for tracking and managing your bottles, where they are, summarized by what criterion, browsing your buys and sells, your consumption, your own tasting notes, and those of others, and general social feedback on the topic of wine. This site has many pretty nifty functions, in particular this drinkability report, which I will come to in a moment, since I needed one particular function it does not have as of yet, and which this video is about. But first let me mention that I'm producing this video celebrating my all-time high of 222 bottles in my cellar. I think you would find this website very useful as soon as you own 50 bottles of wine or more. It can be useful without storing any wine, but it's when you store a lot of wine that this website really begins to shine. What in the world is anyone doing with 200 bottles of wine? That's nothing. Look at some of my friends here. This friend has almost 1,400 bottles. Ben Christiansen, one of the most active members of CellarTracker, has nearly 10 times as much as I have. And the creator and founder, if you can say that, of CellarTracker, Eric Levine, Nomen est Omen, doesn't divulge to us how many bottles he has, but he shows us his cellar. And I'm using this image by his courtesy, which is huge and managed almost scientifically, and this here is just a small part of it. So I would venture to guess that he has way more than 2,000 bottles in his cellar. And so the question arises, are these people mad? And my answer is no, not at all, at least not on those grounds. If your favorite wines are long aging, Spanish Reserva for instance, or other ageable wines, and you want to cellar each bottle for 15 years after purchase before you open it, then you need space for 15 times as many bottles as you drink per year. And if you then drink only 2 bottles a month, then you would in that case already need a cellar of roughly 400 bottles. I'm already planning a video on how to calculate the necessary cellar size relative to your drinking structure. But roughly I would say that a decent wine cellar for a single drinker has to have at least 500 bottles. In my own case, my drinking structure conforms to the maximum space in my cellar, because I like room, and with 222 bottles, my cellar is overflowing. And so I cannot store so many long-aging wines and have to include more early maturing fruit bombs than I would like, because they don't occupy the space for so long. And the fact that I'm not moving over this reason proves that I'm normal in this regard. I think it is safe to say that at the moment you begin to move, or to choose or build a house in order that you be able to store your wine better, that is, the moment your life begins to follow the demands of your cellar rather than vice versa, then you have probably crossed the line to being a wine nerd. And my whole ambition for the last year or two has been to keep that from happening, so I'm containing myself. I'm pretty sure that many aficionados on CellarTracker, if given the choice between wife and cellar, would probably shed a tear, but have no doubt even for a minute that of course they will choose their cellar. Back to the drinkability report, which in my case looks like this right now if I choose the linear mode. But you can also check the estimates for fast or slow aging wines and several other options. It gives you an estimate for how many wines you should be drinking right now in order that your consumption is optimally distributed in the drinking window, ascribed by yourself or others to each wine, taking into account the bottles you have already consumed. So if you've drunk too many of a particular wine, then it will slow down, and so on and so forth. And you don't need to worry if your bottles overage, because this report will surely make that visible to you, and you don't have to worry about such matters at all. Or at least not much, because by and large your drinkability report tells you which bottles to choose from in this respect. Of course, most bottles never get that far, because I can't keep my hands off of them for long enough. And right now, according to the linear model, I have only one 1979 Riesling available for drinking. But with some fast-aging fruit bombs, I'm actually chronically behind, so there it tends to urge me on. What the drinkability report does not give you, however, is what I call the drinking tempo forecast. If you look at this column of availability, how can you be sure that one day you're not going to drown in available bottles? If you have hundreds or thousands of wines in your cellar, it's thinkable that there is at some point going to be a tsunami of bottles becoming available for drinking at the same time, such that you may suddenly have to drink hundreds and hundreds of bottles per year for several years. And then you would have to seriously poison yourself, or at least get fed up with it, unless you want to overage those wines or sell them. And since I didn't find a way to answer that question on this website, what follows for the rest of the video is how I produce my own drinking tempo forecast based on the data that I export to Excel from my own cellar on CellarTracker. This is getting to be a tongue twister. So you click on the link that leads to your cellar, where habitually I sort by quantity to get a sense of an ordered universe, but that's inessential for the forecast. What is essential, however, is that each wine carry your end date, that is, the ending year of your drinking window beyond which you expect to regret not having consumed it earlier. Now, in my case, there are a lot of beverages carrying the end year 2040, since that is the year in which I want to have finished the whole cellar, because I think it will be time to die for me. At least I hope I don't have to live longer than that, but if I do, I will have made sure that I was supplied with wine until then, and can then focus ever more strongly on meditation while drinks become totally neglectable. At least I do not want to have to drink after that. My whiskies, for instance, carry this end date, but also some Iberian reservas, and so there's a little peak towards that year in my forecast. On the way to that forecast, I go to the top right of my cellar and click on Export, choosing comma-separated values for Microsoft Excel, and selecting only the 6 columns: type, quantity, pending delivery, vintage, wine, and drink by, in that order, hitting Export again, which delivers those data into one single text cell for each wine, separated by commas. Next, I simply copy this one column into the first column of my already prepared in advance Excel starter spreadsheet, which uses the well-known Excel text functions to take these data apart into one cell each. If you have any troubles doing that, anyone familiar with the basic Excel functions should be able to assist you, but if you despair, ask me and I can tell you how to do that. As regards the very first feature, type, I'm simplifying it right away, such that anything that is not of the type spirits, according to CellarTracker, counts as a wine for my forecast, even if it is a fortified wine or even a beer, of which presently I don't have any. Only higher ABV spirits, in German Spirituose, are being dealt with separately. I also build the sum of quantity and pending as the effective number, German Anzahl, of bottles for each wine, simply because I expect the pending bottles to actually arrive soon and to be drunk somewhere down the line. All of which, once I hide the text functional machinery, finally leaves the table of all wines listed with their type, that is, as explained before, either a wine or a spirit, number of bottles, vintage, the name of the beverage, and the end of the drinking window. The vintage 1001 here seems to be CellarTracker's code for non-vintage, and assumes that there are no surviving vintage bottles from that year, and that seems like a pretty safe and reasonable assumption. Then, for my own immediate convenience, in this table I also calculated the number of days for each single bottle of this wine until the end of the drinking window, and the drinking tempo for this particular wine in bottles per year, which is kind of useful for my major positions, and better than the same function in CellarTracker's drinkability report, since there it doesn't take into account how much of the present year has already passed, whereas here in my spreadsheets the calculations are all based on the exact number of days from today until December 31st of the end year of the drinking window. This table now becomes the basis for calculating the overall drinking tempo forecast, which in my case presently looks like this here on the other sheet. So right away it gives me the OK at the bottom there in the form of a very moderate presently required drinking tempo, which at this state of my cellar happens to be 1.8 bottles of wine per month and 1.7 bottles of spirits per year, which is a very moderate drinking tempo, so there definitely is no future alcoholic tsunami implicit in my cellar so far. Now let's see how it arrives at this statement, what it means, and what the diagram tells me. Since the diagram is simply the visualization of the numbers in this C column, let's zoom in on this table on the left for the moment, and understanding will easily arise from there. This column B simply shows the number of bottles of all wines, the end date of the drinking window of which is equal to the year named in column A. And that is realized with the SUMIF function of Excel as follows. It summarizes all numbers in the column J in the other sheet, which contain the number of bottles for each wine, under the conditions that the column P there, containing the end years for each wine's drinking window, be equal to the year named in column A here, and that column C there, containing the type for each wine, be of the type wine. So in this table I'm disregarding the spirits, which I will get to in a minute. Next, in column C, I calculate the drinking tempo required until a year named in column A by adding up the numbers in column B up to and including this row and dividing by the number of years starting from today until the 31st of December of that year using the date value function of Excel. So in the case of the required drinking tempo until 2020, it adds up all bottles due from now until 2020, which happens to be 108 bottles, and divides the result by the number of years from now until the end of 2020. It calculates that number of years by the difference between that year and this year, and adds the number of days left in this year divided by 365, for simplicity's sake, which is unprecise because some years have 366 days, but here I didn't want to exaggerate precision. And the number of days left in this year are simply the difference between the date value of December 31st of this year and the date value of today, which you can see here. Let's check this example of the drinking tempo until 2020. There are 51 days left this year, which makes for 0.1397 years. So there are 5.1397 years left until the end of 2020, and if you divide 108 by that number, you get roughly 21.01 bottles, which rounds to 21.0. Check. What this drinking tempo column C tells me for each year is that from now until the end of that year, I have to consume as many bottles of wine per year on average as this drinking tempo suggests in order that none of the wines overage, according to my own stated drinking windows. And assuming I don't die before 2040, that means that I will have to keep the drinking tempo for all the years from now until 2040. And that in turn means that my present drinking tempo will have to be as high as the maximum of all the numbers in this column C. And it is for this reason that the number given in the presently required drinking tempo is that maximum divided by the number of months in a year, which is 12. In the case of the spirits, we have a simpler situation since all my spirits drinking windows end by decree in 2040, and I simply count the bottles of all beverages of the type spirits and in an analogous manner divide by the number of years from now until December 31st of 2040, which results in the presently required drinking tempo for the spirits of bottles per year. As a little aside, I get to check my numbers a bit by adding up all wine bottles in column B and the number of spirits in this cell where it says 42 presently, which results in the number 223 right now and tells me the universe is in order because those are exactly the 222 bottles in my cellar plus the one pending. And in case this hasn't become clear enough, the drinking tempo forecast for each year is not the number of bottles due in that year, but the average number of bottles I have to drink per year from now on until the end of that year in order to keep all wines from overaging that are due until that year. And the maximum is the dominant import of this diagram. if I would consume only the bottles required until the end of any year prior to the year of maximum, then the graph for all the years after that would rise. For instance, if I would only consume the 16.4 bottles per year required until the end of 2019, then in the year 2020 I would have to consume not 21 but 40 bottles. Right now, however, this drinking tempo forecast tells me that a very moderate consumption rate will avoid all overaging in my cellar, and that there is plenty of leeway for experimental buying, and particularly for wines ageable beyond 2020. Finally, I created this little cellar growth diagram based on my CellarTracker purchased and consumed data. But I won't go into how I did it, and that's simple enough anyway.